Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Kmart. I want to talk about some basketball, and today we are going to be talking about the Philadelphia 76ers, uh, a team that entered the season with some questions, right? Some drama hanging over their head, uh, mostly around the James Harden situation, but as you can see, looking at the standings at this point in the season, still early on, but Philly really is not having too many problems now. The Harden situation has been resolved. The team itself is off to a flying start. They've got one loss on the season as of the recording of this video. They are top in the Eastern Conference, and as a matter of fact, they have the best record in the league overall by virtue of having, I think, one. We've got one less loss than like Boston, Dallas, Denver, those teams. But technically speaking, it is still the best record in the league. They are maintaining positions in the top five, both in terms of offensive and defensive rating. In terms of various categories, they lead the league in free throws. They're top five in both rebounding and steals. They're first in blocks. They're top five in points per game. So the 76ers have been one of these sort of elite teams in the league on both ends of the floor, which is honestly a little bit surprising because we thought this team might have some bigger difficulties, or at least I certainly did. So we're going to talk just a little bit about what the 76ers are doing right now and how they addressed some of the maybe biggest perceived issues that folks thought they had before the campaign got underway. So in that vein, let's sort of talk about some things here, because coming into the season, we relatively sort of knew that three things were going to happen here, right? Thing number one, Joel Embiid was going to get his stats. He was going to continue putting up some pretty monstrous stat lines, right? Barring an injury, he was going to be continuing to play at a high level, and so far he has. Thing number two that we sort of knew beforehand is that Tyrese Maxey was going to score. That part of his game was really never in doubt with or without James Harden there. Maxey was able to put the ball in the basket, and obviously this season he has done that, including very recently that 50-point game that he dropped. So we knew he was going to get his points. Third thing that we pretty much knew going into the season was that Harden was not going to be here long term. He was either going to miss a lot of time or they were going to trade him, which obviously they did. So those were the three sort of known factors here for the 76ers at the start of the season, which led us into three big questions for this team once the Harden trade was completed. Or once it looked like the Harden trade was going to be completed, because the questions kind of emerged a little bit before the actual trade went through. But question number one for the 76ers was, can Tyrese Maxey, and by extension sort of the rest of that guard core for Philly as well, make up for the playmaking and assist count that Harden would be leaving behind? He averaged double-digit assists, and that was something that the guards that were remaining were going to have to try to sort of make up the difference for. Question number two was, can the 76ers get contributions from people other than Embiid and Maxey? This is basically the same question we asked last year. It was Embiid and Harden. In that instance, the dynamic remains the same. The 76ers are going to be led from the front by their two now biggest stars in Embiid and Maxey, but the question was, how much can the supporting cast support that duo? And of course, the third question really got solidified once, obviously, the Harden trade was happening. The question was, can the 76ers get any current value back from the James Harden trade? Now, obviously, the picks that came the 76ers' way are important. They could play a pretty sizable factor in the future, but this is more keyed in on the guys specifically that they got back in that trade. Did anyone that they received from the Clippers have a shot of giving the 76ers, as currently constructed, immediate value? So those are the big three questions, and we're just going to sort of dive right into the first one, and that is Tyrese Maxey and the other guards on the 76ers roster as playmakers, not just scorers. So The 76ers are holding on right now. If you take a look at where their assist count lies, they're about 16th in the league, really kind of sitting middle of the pack, but that's largely because most of their offense does still sort of go through Embiid or Maxey, so the ball moves, but at the end of the day, it does tend to end up in one of their two hands. Of course, 16th in the league, you would think, they're not doing so hot here, but it's interesting to note if you go back and look to the 76ers last season with Harden averaging double-digit assists, by the end of the year, they were pretty much in that 15th to 16th range anyway, so they're pretty much exactly where they were before, and a large part of that is because Maxey and the other guards are doing their best to sort of step up and be more of a facilitating group than they were in the past, right? Even if they're not quite reaching Harden's double digits, Maxey himself is averaging 7.5 assists per season so far, which is more than double his career average. So, as I said before, we knew he was going to score. We knew he could put points up on the board. The question was, if he's going to be sort of the main guy running this offense, how well can he set up for others? And so far, that's pretty good. 7.5 assists per game for a guy who was averaging like 3.5 prior to this season is an unbelievable improvement for him. And it isn't coming at the expense of his scoring load. I think that's the most important aspect here as well. He is still putting up significant amounts of points. Obviously, as I said, he just had a 50-point game, so he's not slouching in that department. When Maxey leaves the floor, though, which honestly isn't very often, he's averaging 37.8 minutes per game, so he is, still a younger player who doesn't quite need as much rest as other guys. But when he does come out of the game for short amounts of time, the 76ers have been able to lean on the bench in terms of their guards, guys like D'Anthony Melton, even Patrick Beverley, who really is not known too much for offensive contributions, more of a defensive specialist, but they're still running the point well enough to sort of hold the line while Maxey is on the floor, or off the floor rather, excuse me. Those two guys I mentioned, Melton and Pat Bev, are combining to average just over 6 assists per game, 4.1 for Melton, 2.3 for Beverley. So, they're not sort of blowing anyone away with their passing, with their ability to run the offense, but they're doing enough to keep the 76ers either in a game or in the lead while the star player in Maxey sort of rests, right? And yeah, there is something to be said here, for those secondary guards coming in. Some of those assists just come from getting Embiid the ball in the block and letting him go to work. But, that's the offensive system for the 76ers, right? You can't really blame the guards for feeding Embiid when he's that capable of scoring. And even Embiid himself, just as a slight tangent here, is making a bit more of an effort to facilitate for his teammates as well. He is averaging 5.5 assists so far, about 9 or 10 games into the season, which is pretty well above his average in previous campaigns. A full assist per game, I think, higher than what he had last year. So does that maintain over the course of the full campaign? Probably not, but at least right now, the guards are trying to make an effort to get the ball passed around more, and so is Embiid as well. And that's part of the reason why the Sixers offense is scoring so many points. They are shooting efficiently, they're finding the open guy. It's not just a black hole in the form of Embiid where he just gets the ball down low and then never gets rid of it. So on that front, at least, things are going well. Maxey and the other guards are doing enough to keep the offense going. As I said, at the end of the day, they're still 16th in the league in assists, so there's room for improvement. But what they've got right now is still leading into a top 5 offense. So it's kind of hard to argue against those results. But that moves us into the second point here, help for Embiid and Maxey. Will the 76ers overly rely on their star duo, or would they be able to get them help from the supporting cast? So far, the help has come, right? Two guys sort of I'm looking at in particular, the first of which is Tobias Harris, someone that in the past I've been a little bit critical of. He was given a sizable contract that it felt like he was not living up to as consistently as the 76ers might have wanted, but So far this season, he is doing a pretty admirable job of being that sort of third or fourth option for the team. He's averaging 19.9 points per game along with 6.3 rebounds, 2.6 assists in there as well. So the occasional sort of assist for Harris. But perhaps the most important aspect here for Tobias Harris out of all of this is that he is shooting an incredibly efficient percentage. He is 58.9% shooting from the field in general and 40.7% from three. So he is making a contribution. He's averaging nearly 20 points a game, and he's doing it without requiring a crazy amount of shots, right? The efficiency is important because every shot being taken by someone other than Embiid or Maxey is one that the 76ers are less confident in, but Harris so far has done his job. He scored, he's played decent defense, he's gotten the rebounds when needed, and he is not wasting too many opportunities. So Harris is coming through for the 76ers. Another guy who had been coming through for them was the recently acquired Kelly Oubre Jr., who came over from Charlotte. He had been on something of a redemption arc with the 76ers to start the season after earning, unfortunately for him, a bit of a reputation for being very inefficient in terms of his shot selection while he was with the Hornets. He could score, but it would take him more shots than you were really comfortable with to get his points. That was kind of the reputation that he had built up. In Philly, though, things were a little different. He was averaging 16.3 points per game, 5.1 rebounds on 50% shooting overall from the field. So he was providing a spark. He was providing a little bit of extra firepower for this 76ers team. And like Harris, he was doing so without just siphoning away too many shots from the star duo of Maxey and Embiid. So he had been playing excellently. To this point. I keep using the past tense, though, if you haven't noticed, because Kelly Oubre Jr. is unfortunately going to miss some time here. He was struck by a car, just sort of walking around, and a car hit him. He's, well, hopefully, just fine, and is expected to miss some time while he recovers. I don't know if there were any sort of serious or major injuries for him. Didn't seem that way from the initial reporting, but obviously, that was the initial reporting. They might not have had the whole story, but hopefully Oubre is good to recover. It may take him some time, but when he comes back, the hope is that he can still be just as useful for the 76ers, but for now he is, missing in action for them. So that puts a little bit of a damper on the point that I was making here, but the 76ers were getting contributions from guys other than Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid. Now, they aren't going to lead the league in bench points anytime soon. That's not really going to happen. But the Stars are consistently putting up big nights. They're getting their big numbers. Embiid and Maxey are leading from the front in that regard. And their secondary guys like Tobias Harris, guys like Kelly Oubre Jr., and I suppose with Oubre out, maybe now you look to guys like Anthony Melton. They're all doing well enough to supplement the performances from their star players. And at the end of the day, that's really all you're going to need for the regular season. Embiid and Maxey are going to carry probably over half of the workload themselves. You just need some of the guys around them to step up for short bursts over some of these games. And through the first 9 or 10 games, that's exactly what they had gotten. We'll see what it looks like for them moving forward, since, again, they have to, at least temporarily, find a way to replace Oubre's production and his spot in the lineup. But that leads us into the third and final point here, which is what the 76ers got back from the Clippers and whether there was any sort of immediate value in some of those guys. The emphasis in the trade, obviously, was getting that additional draft pick. As I said before, that was what the 76ers and Daryl Morey were sort of holding out for. They wanted that second first rounder. They ended up getting it via a third team. But the hope here was that the 76ers would still get use out of the guys that Los Angeles sent to them as well. Right? In the offseason, while they were worried about Harden and trying to make this trade happen, there was a little bit of attrition. They did lose some of those bench pieces to other teams because they weren't overly focused on trying to sort of re-sign them or go out and sign anyone else to replace them. So a little bit of the depth goes away. The hope was that could be replenished with this trade. And honestly, that's gone decently well so far. You look at some of the bigger names that they've picked up here, and they're already seeing some decent time. Nicholas Batum has seen just over 23 minutes per game through only 3 games so far, but he's been put into the action almost immediately. Robert Covington has played just over 10 minutes per game through his first 5 games with the 76ers, and so the 76ers have gotten some decent minutes contributions, at least, out of these guys. There are a couple of players they received in the trade who really have not seen the floor too much. Marcus Morris and KJ Martin have realistically not gotten off the bench too many times. But 3 players out of the 5 you acquired in that trade are being worked into your rotation, and that's sort of the thing that matters here. These guys don't need to rack up the stats, they just need to eat minutes, and they need to fill out roster spots and rotational spots, and that's what they're doing, right? The depth has been replenished a little bit, and to be honest, I say these guys don't need to rack up the stats too much. That's still true, I hold to that, but they are finding ways to contribute here. So we'll talk about Nicholas Batum first. He has averaged 6.3 points since coming over to the 76ers, which I know isn't a crazy scoring load for him, but he has gotten the majority of those points from beyond the arc. He's made 5 of his 8 3-pointers so far with the 76ers. He's a career 36.5% 3-point shooter as well, and he can represent a little bit of a deep threat off the bench, someone who maybe you're not going to run too many plays for, but he can get you a bucket if necessary. He can bolster that second or third unit a little bit. Maybe he's not always the greatest threat sort of defensively, but he's, still a relatively big body that you can sort of throw in there if needed. So Batum finding sort of ways to contribute. Meanwhile, for Covington, he is doing the same, not really on the offensive side of the floor though. He has not done much scoring for the 76ers, and honestly, it has been like 3 or 4 seasons since he's even averaged double figures for a season in terms of his scoring. But he's making the contributions on the defensive end. He is sort of making those hustle plays, those energy plays. He's played about 5 games so far this season for the 76ers, and he's recorded 11 steals and 2 blocked shots. So he is finding ways to make his presence felt on the floor, even if he's not getting too many shots, even if those shots aren't falling. And that's kind of the point for these 2 guys. Batum and Covington are there for depth, right? They're not going to be put in the starting lineup. They may not even be in the first sort of 6 or 7 guys in the lineup, but they can go in, they can play you some solid minutes, they know their role, and that's how they're going to contribute, and that's exactly the kind of guys that the 76ers wanted to fill out this lineup when they were making the Harden trade in the first place. So can't really complain too much about that. The 76ers got some pretty solid stuff back in terms of the trade. Harden wasn't playing for them anyway, so in terms of what they lose, there's always a what if. There's always sort of an opportunity cost, so to speak, of, what if you could have added Harden back to the team as constructed? But that wasn't going to happen. That ship had sailed, so they make the trade, they get some guys who can help out immediately, and they're going to roll with that. And so far, they've only lost a single game. So the 76ers have made the most of a bad situation. Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey are playing at absolute all-star levels. The trade that they made, getting rid of James Harden, has bolstered a bench that so far is holding the line well enough to help the team win. They're not rocking the boat, they're not blowing any massive leads, they're not building you too many leads either, but they can hold what the Sixers currently have, which, as I said, has been good enough to get them a pretty high amount of wins here through their first handful of games. So the 76ers are one of the best teams in the league right now on both sides of the ball. Can they maintain that across the whole rest of the season? I don't really know, right? That is going to be the question. We'll keep an eye on guys like Embiid and Maxey. Their stat lines might come back down to earth just a little bit as the campaign goes on, as the initial burst of energy at the start of the season sort of, fades out and we get into the doldrums of, December, January, February, before the playoff push really sort of gets underway. But for right now, this team looks incredibly strong. The only real concern that I would have is the temporary loss of Kelly Oubre Jr. He was putting up, as I said, 16 or so points per game. I'm not sure immediately who steps into that role production-wise, right? Maybe it's one of the guys they got. Maybe it's a guy like Covington or Batum. Maybe DeAnthony Melton gets more offensive opportunities and he's able to make up that difference. But, Oubre Jr. is not going to be available for a little bit. Kind of hard to blame him. Again, he got hit by a car, just minding his own business. So we'll see how they recover from that. But at the end of the day, so long as Maxey and Embiid continue to play the way that they've been playing, the 76ers are going to be hard to beat. So that's all I got. Just wanted to talk about it because we had so many questions about the 76ers coming into this season. I think a lot of people, myself included, sort of started writing them off a little bit, saying, they'll probably be, top 6, top 8, something like that. They'll be in the playoff picture, but we were looking at moves being made by Boston, right? Going for Porzingis. We were anticipating the Heat completing a Damian Lillard trade. And so the 76ers not making moves and still being mired in the James Harden situation really left them much lower down the list of priorities. They were a lot less exciting than some of the other teams in the East. But, look where we are now, right? The 76ers are the best team in the league. The Heat didn't do the Lillard trade, so they're not quite as high up there as we thought. And the Celtics did still make the trade, and they're sitting right behind the 76ers. But Philly came in and honestly maybe used some of that doubt, used some of that lack of attention as fuel to come out to one of the best starts we've seen in quite a while for them. So again, will it carry on throughout the rest of the season? I have no idea, but for now it looks pretty damn good. But feel free to share your thoughts. Let me know what you think. Can the 76ers keep this going? How much do you think the loss of Oubre Jr. for however long he's injured, how do you think that's going to affect them? Who, if anyone, steps up and sort of fills that role? And how far do you think this 76ers squad can realistically go? But feel free to share your thoughts. But other than that, thank you all so much for watching, and I will talk to you later.